Codependence is a huge issue in the mid-singles community. A lot of us have been through marriages where there was an unhealthy balance between the two people.
We enjoy making these inspirational videos, so please participate by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing.
What is codependence? Well, it's an excessive psychological reliance on a dysfunctional partner. And we'll flesh that out a little bit.
One thing I wonder in this definition, it doesn't make logical sense that we would rely on someone dysfunctional, and yet it is a real phenomenon. I mean, it's a really big problem, right?
Right. If I don't have a healthy center, oftentimes I'll try to get my worth from another person, and sometimes that can mean caretaking of that person. The problem is it can really creep into some crazy things, like I might need that other person to take my advice and do what I want to validate me. And maybe the person doesn't want to do what I suggest. And if I feel personally hurt by that, it's going to damage relationships, right?
It puts a lot of pressure on a relationship when we're relying on the other person for our emotional well-being.
Another thing we've seen in this regard is people getting remarried because they don't know how to be alone. I've seen people really overeager to replace what they've lost, but you don't replace a 15, 20-year marriage with someone you meet 3 months later. It's just not the same.
How do you think that works?
I'm not going to tell anybody in our audience that they can't do that or even that they shouldn't do that. I'm saying don't do it with a desire to replace what you lost, or you're driven because you're afraid to be alone.
I was afraid to be alone after the end of my first long-term marriage, and so I ended up in a second short-term marriage that didn't end up lasting because I wasn't really ready to move on. I wanted to be, I thought I was, but I really wasn't. I needed to heal first. The
best thing you can bring to a marriage is a healthy self. You know, there's all kinds of other things you can bring, anything from money to a career to children, but the most important thing is to bring a healthy self. I want to tell you too, being needed by your partner is overrated, and that's another form of codependence. I get my value from needing to go bail my alcoholic spouse out of jail, every other weekend or something. Or
I get my value from taking care of someone with a chronic illness, someone who's depending on me to fulfill that role for them. Of course, it's honorable to care for a loved one when they're ill. I mean, in sickness and health, right? But it can be very disastrous to our own mental health if we ignore our emotional well-being.
Codependence actually seems generous in the way that Cathy just described, but it's driven fundamentally by a poor self-image. It's one thing to say, hey, I want to show up for my loved one because they need me, they're sick or whatever, but not to derive your value from that. Where do you derive your value? From your status as a son or daughter of heavenly parents.
And our value is intact no matter whether we feel it or not, whether we see it or not, whether others see it or not. Our value is not defined by anything outside of us. It's simply there. And it's something that either we feel and we understand or we don't.
Have you ever noticed that a lot of teenagers hate their parents? One reason is because they need their parents, but they don't want to need them. They don't want to need their money, they don't want to need their governance. Oftentimes that can happen in a need-based relationship. The person who actually needs the other one ends up resenting the person they need. And oftentimes they'll criticize the way that person is meeting their needs. That person feels taken for granted and sad about it very often. If we don't want to be needed, what do we need? What do we want? We want to be wanted. Being wanted is far superior to being needed. Being chosen is far superior to being needed. I've never liked the cliche that you hear in movies all the time, you complete me. Okay, Cathy does not complete me. I was complete before I married her. She was complete before she married me. Now, that doesn't mean we can't get together and have a great time. It just means that we don't need each other in that way.
Which means we're open to want each other, which is so much better.
Right. If I don't need Cathy, I can just choose to love her, which I do. That's a much more healthy feeling than I need you or you complete me and I'm nothing without you. I would die without you, that sort of thing.
I do believe when we love someone that we do risk feeling hurt if we lose them. Whether it's through death or divorce, when we lose a loved one, it hurts. And that's natural and normal. But hopefully we maintain a healthy sense of self and we don't give all of our identity over to that relationship so much that we can't become a healthy person on our own again if that's needed.
Yeah, Cathy, I appreciate you bringing that up. It reminds me, President Russell M. Nelson said, the only way to take the sorrow out of death is to take the love out of life. We're not suggesting that you become impervious to pain in the interest of being self-sufficient or of not needing another person. Loving another person isn't the same as needing them. And if you lose that person to death or divorce, of course you're going to feel pain over it. But as Cathy just pointed out, that's because of love, not because of need. And, we have created those bonds and those ties. We love the person because we love them, not because we need them or we need them to need us to feel valuable and worthwhile.
One thing I love about being married later in life and having found each other after relationship loss and subsequent singleness, we're more independent in our relationship. And that creates a healthy interdependence where we coordinate our schedules and we like to spend time together, and we even do this Love in Later Years business together, and that's really fun. But we also come and go as we please. We know we can make ourselves food. We can clean up after our own self, buy things. We're just more functioning as strong individuals within our marriage, and I like that.
I like that too, where we both feel like complete individuals and yet we come together for certain divine purposes that we couldn't fulfill alone. But we're not getting our value from the other person, and that's where you really get stuck in the mud with codependency.
And that's what can give your relationship a lot of freedom and goodness, is when you can take that pressure off the relationship and own your own emotional well-being so that you can come together and be a healthy partnership.
Cathy, I've noticed one sign that a person has some codependent issues is when that person is trying to mold or shape their own personality, a little like a chameleon, to be what the other person wants, for fear of losing that relationship and the validation that they need in that relationship. Cathy, what are some other signs that maybe there's a codependent relationship going on?
Well, I tend to be fairly empathic, and I was just thinking about how I have to balance that, my ability to meet the energy of other people and be self-aware and show up as my highest self rather than just giving in to whatever the energy is in the room. I'm going to manage my own feelings through all of that.
Right, and I think there's a tendency often to try to feel safe by controlling everything around us. And the problem with that is, number one, it's very frustrating to the people around us. And secondly, it's frustrating to me myself if I'm doing that, because ultimately, I can't control other people.
I mean, how boring would this world be if we just lived in a world full of puppets we controlled?
There are times when I might need to go for a drive and be by myself for 20 minutes just to get my shalom back if I'm disrupted. And you know what? That's a great thing to be able to do and realize Cathy didn't make me frustrated or angry or whatever it was. I got frustrated, angry, but I'm a worthwhile person. I'm worth 20 minutes to go and center myself again.
Well, and as life coaches, we talk a lot about the separating out our thoughts from the facts. Our thoughts lead to our emotions. And so if you take that situation where you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling whatever you're feeling, you can always go back to your mind and think, what did I think that led me here?
It's important for us to develop an awareness of when we are slipping into a codependent mindset, such as when I'm beginning to fear losing another person because I may have said something they didn't agree with, or I find myself choosing what to wear or what meal to make or whatever, based on totally what that other person wants, or what I think they want, or even what I think might be best for them. When my point of reference is that other person all the time, then I think we can recognize we're slipping into that codependent mindset. And so what do? You separate the story. My husband might get mad. My wife might be disappointed in me. Whatever the interpretation is, you can shift your interpretation and you can say, you know what? I'm going to show up in an intentional way, consistent with my integrity, without being so focused on pleasing another person or taking care of another person. It's a matter of being aware, being intentional, and exercising the thoughts you have surrounding another person.
And taking responsibility for your own emotional well-being and not putting that on a relationship or another person.
Being true to yourself, having integrity to your principles and your own character is an important part of dating, just as it is an important part of being married. You know what happens if you are too focused on the other person? You overload the relationship, and it's not good. Remember that codependence is not love, and love does not mean codependence. Every time is a great time for more love in your life. Thank you for watching.